Hello everybody and welcome to Astro Pillars Astrology. Hope everyone is surviving the eclipse season. I've heard mixed reviews about that. Everyone seems to be either really tired or there's a few people that are energized and a few people very sick, obviously because I work in a clinic, practitioner of Chinese medicine. So anyway, hope everyone's surviving it and it's going well. I'm going to do a talk today, a little talk on the 5 elements actually, which I don't really do so much, and I just thought it'd be a cool thing to do because I based it on one of my Substack articles. So for those who are not subscribed to my Substack, please feel free to do so because I aim to do quite a few articles once a week if I can, and then of course I've got a few things in the pipeline in regards to medical astrology and cell-sold astrology and a lot of other pretty cool subjects that are coming up. So anyway, I wanted to talk about the 5 elements because I based an article on this, and obviously as a Chinese med practitioner we use this a lot. And of course when it comes to Chinese astrology, definitely we use this. So I'm going to give people a bit of a basic flavor of how this kind of works, maybe probably from a planetary perspective more so than a medical one. I might save that one for another time, but we're getting a lot closer to what's coming up at the moment, because this year is absolutely flying, year of the inward snake, and we are soon to be going into the Yang Fire Horse year, which I'll probably just start putting it out there now. So for people who are interested, I always do an annual year of the horse astrological rundown, and I try and do it kind of as a tribute to the year of the horse, but get people to send in their date of birth and time, because I'll do a live and then I can run through people's Bazi Chinese astrology chart and give them a flavor from what may potentially be coming up for the year. And I thought I'd put it out there now because this year is absolutely flying. And something's really speeding things up. It's interesting. Even my son was saying, he's only 12 years old, that this year's just absolutely flying. And I never really remember time going quickly when I was younger. But anyway, let's talk about the elements, because this is a pretty cool subject. And, you know, the 5 elements is what they call Wu Xing, the 5 movements, the 5 alchemical elements of change, right? Which is thousands of years old. And the ancient Chinese have obviously used this in the divination arts, astrology, martial arts. So it's really pretty much prevalent in every culture, right? In their culture, so to speak. And by the way, talking about every culture, if you understand yin and yang and 5 elements, it's universal medicine. You can apply these sequences, or it's pretty much just telling us how to read nature. So when you understand these principles, then you can apply them everywhere in your life. So it's very cool to actually know your Chinese astrological Bazi chart. And I've got an example there because I'm going to be talking about the stems and branches, because each one of these 5 elements, right, relates to one of the heavenly stems, right? And when we talk about the stems, the heavenly stems, all we're talking about is yin and yang. So what that means is, if we're talking about the fire element stems, there's a yin and yang association with that. Same with earth, same with metal, same with water, same with wood. And they actually have different, what they call the heavenly stems. There's yang fire, there's yin fire, there's yang earth, there's yang metal, there's yin metal, there's yang water, there's yin water, and there's yang wood, and there's yin wood, right? And so basically, you know, this is one of the main things that's really considered in ancient Chinese philosophy and wisdom, as well as they apply it to psychology and medicine, and like I said, the martial arts and the divination arts, such as, say, the Yi Jing. So what it comes down to is all these elements, right? Fire element, earth, metal, they have a planetary association with them. right? So a lot of people talk elements, but when we're talking about Wu Xing, it's the 5 motions. What are the 5 motions? Well, the planets, the ancient called the planets the wanderers. The wanderers move, right? There's a very classic book in Chinese medicine called The Yellow Emperor. It's a classic of internal medicine, what they call the Yi Jing. And it's all based on this character who they call Huangdi, right? Who is considered the Yellow Emperor. And it's a series of questions this person asked to Huangdi, and it's a very, very interesting book. But the Yellow Emperor, in my opinion, is the planet Saturn, right? The earth element. So I personally think it's a metaphor, but this is a deeper subject in itself. But if people have got this fantastic book, which is actually very hard to get, because I was very interested in the planet Saturn at one point in time, and there's a very good book by David Talbot, I think his name is, called The Saturn Myth. And he talks about the planet Saturn as being actually similar to the back in the ancient world as the sun, right? Because the planet, it was a lot closer to the earth. This is a whole wild subject, but I want to do a talk on that eventually, because immediately when I was studying Chinese medicine, I thought the Yellow Emperor, and when I found a copy of this book, I was immediately thinking the planet Saturn, which made a lot of sense to me. But that's a subject for a different time. But each of these elements is related to a planet. So the fire element's related to Mars. And I also say that the fire element is also related to the sun, the luminary, right? So there's 2 sides. I'd say yang fire is connected to the sun. Yin fire is more to do with Mars, right? Yin fire is more explosive fire, whereas yang fire is more like radiant and generates warmth. And in my book, The Beginner's Guide to Chinese Astrology, I get kind of right into the psychological elements of these to give people a basic flavor for these kind of things. But the fire element, it does have the Martian principle as well as the solar, in my opinion. So then we move to the planet Earth, and then we have, which is ruled by the planet Saturn. So Saturn giving us stability, confidence, patience, perseverance, and security, and it's connected to the color yellow, right? Whereas Saturn, I guess, in planetary astrology is connected to color black. So they're very different, Chinese astrology compared to planetary astrology, but I are pretty much based, when I do consultations for astrology, I always do Bazi planetary astrology plus Chinese, because I'm a Gemini, so I've got to kind of have 2 things going on at the one time. So the metal element is connected to the planet Venus, and Venus gives us, similar to, I guess the Venetian sense of this, when we're talking about this, is similar to the Justice card in the tarot, right? So it gives us the clarity, the rationale, the law, the politics, the accumulated knowledge, and methodical thinking. Metal element is a very discriminating type of energy, right? Similar to the Virgo types, right? They like precision and they like detail. And then we have, obviously, metal generates water. So water element is Mercury. But of course it's connected to the luminary, the moon, as well. I would just throw that in there, but primarily, the ancients were connecting it to Mercury, which is connected to thought, speech. And Mercury is connected to innovations as well, because I guess innovation in planetary astrology is connected to more Uranus, but Mercury is kind of the lower octave of that planet. And it's connected to movement, networking, and socializing. And then, of course, we've got water generates wood, and then we have the planet Jupiter associated with this, which is connected to luck, fortune, philosophy, wisdom, teaching, and it's quite a visionary and a clearly expansive type energy. So it's interesting when it comes to these planets. And I just wanted to share, right, about this, because we've got Mars connected to Saturn. So from the 5 elements perspective and a planetary perspective, right, Mars supports Earth, and Saturn supports Venus. Venus supports Mercury, and Mercury supports Jupiter, and then Jupiter supports Mars. This is the production cycle going around in that clockwise direction, right? And I've just got the summary of that here for people who want to know, like overheads and things like this, about what I just mentioned in terms of the planetary aspect there. And then, of course, let's just go back to this diagram, because I just want to mention, right? So a lot of these, the diagrams of the 5 elements, the productive cycle, and there's a control cycle, which is the 5-pointed star. Fire melts metal, metal attacks wood, wood attacks earth, earth attacks water. Now this cycle, right, comes from really the Tai Chi, which is the supreme ultimate, which is born out of what they call Uji, the numinous void, the infinite nothingness, or which is like of our primordial universe, right? Ancient Chinese were really big on this kind of thing, and especially in Taoist cosmology and things like this. And this is how the Tai Chi, gives birth to the two, and then that gives birth to the myriad of things, right? And this is where we get the concepts of Bagua and this kind of thing, right? Bazi, the number 8 is quite significant and special in ancient China. But anyway, so the production cycle, right? From a planetary point of view, we'll start from wood. Wood element increases, right? The power and potency of the Martian energy, the fire element. And it does this by luck and good fortune to increase the likely conquest and victory of Mars. So it almost like, you need the luck and the fortune to be able to generate a victorious conquest of some kind, right? Mars is connected most likely to power, force, military inspiration, enthusiasm as well, and expansion. It's quite a warmth, expansive energy. And we need to have this. And Martian energy is connected to discipline, right? So Mars supports Saturn, right? In its ability to support the discipline of Mars helps support the institution and stabilities, right, of government. And Saturn supports, let me just rephrase that. Mars supports Saturn by supporting the prosperity on Earth, institutions, stability, and government, confidence and longevity, right? These are Saturnian qualities. But before that, we need to have this expansive energy. We also need to have this discipline, right, to be able to create this type of stability on Earth. And then, of course, Saturn supports Venus. So from the womb of the Earth element, so to speak, deep within the Earth, we can generate metal. So coming from this position of stability, confidence, longevity, support, feeling nurtured and structured in some way, right, gives us the ability to express that Venetian energy of creating independence, rationale, law, methodical thinking. This is all to do with that Venetian energy. It gives us clarity, right? So, and the clarity we can get, right, because the metal element's very discriminating, so it supports Mercury. So once we've got all this clarification, this rationale, this precision to detail, then of course it supports Mercury in a way of giving clarity of thought and excellence in speech and discrimination when it comes to the words. So you end up becoming a wordsmith, right? Metals like the sword, like in the tarot, the swords. Metal, people with prominent metal can be extremely good wordsmiths in support of that planet Mercury. And then, of course, Mercury, right? Like once we've got the clarity of thought, the speech, the discrimination with words, then Mercury supports Jupiter in its essence to create the philosophical wisdom, right? That's the higher mind, to be able to express our thoughts and ideas, so to speak. So Mercury supports Jupiter in that way. And then we look into the control cycle of how the planets keep the other planets in check, right? So the control cycle, like say, for example, fire dominating metal, well, the control cycle kind of keeps the negative side of the planetary energies in check by conquering them when they're out of balance. This is kind of what happens, all right? So in a way, if we look at Mercury controlling Mars, so Mercury controls and keeps Mars in check, so to speak. Well, it does this. It keeps it in check. The forces of when the forces of fire are imbalanced, right? When there's an unbalanced expansion of power, or say military order, right? Mercury keeps it in check through the use of the words, the public speaking their mind, having the ability to use their speech to call out this expansive power that can easily lead to things like obviously excess violence or worse, state dictatorship, right? So the Mercury uses the speech and the freedom of thought to be able to call this out, so to speak. And then fire, of course, Mars controls Venus in a way, because when the enthusiastic energy of the Martian principle, right? Because it can have a lot of force, enthusiasm, but it controls metal, right? In a way, because when the metal element gets imbalanced, it becomes hypercritical and over meticulous and too controlling, right? So Mars tends to, override that with its enthusiasm and its passion, kind of telling you, overrides Venus, saying it will cut out all that. You're looking at too much of the detail here, right? So it controls it over on that level. And then we've got Saturn controlling Mercury. So the Saturn, the stability, the institutions, the government controls, in a way controls Mercury, making sure your ideas don't become, ungrounded in reality, because Saturn rules the reality principle. If they're not backed up by facts, or if the ideas haven't proven the test of time, right? So it keeps things in check on that level. And then we have Venus controlling Jupiter, right? So the rationale and the reason, the clarity of thought, tends to subdue wood, right? When it gets out of balance. When wood gets out of balance, right, it gets inflated, it gets arrogant, it gets conceit. It's like leads to ego inflation. So the meticulousness of the Venus overriding the Jupiterian energies, it keeps it in check through logic, reason, rationale, pulling you back down to earth, saying, your ideas are a little bit too pie in the sky. Let's bring them back down. Metal will, cut to the chase and just is very discriminating on that level. And then, of course, we've got Jupiter controlling Saturn. So the philosophy of the wisdom of Jupiter, the visionary aspects, tends to control Earth in a way, because the Earth element, when it becomes imbalanced in a way, can get very frozen in time, because Earth, Saturn rules time. The philosophy and the wisdom of Jupiter can keep the government overreach in check. It can call out, say, the consensus reality, or things that are holding us on to the past, keep us tied to the past. So the vision of Jupiter wants to expand things, right? And if the Saturn's getting out of order or becoming too tied to the material plane, too stuck in ideas, and not wanting to progress and move forward, that visionary aspect of Jupiter will want to make it move forward. And these are just these are just examples I've thrown in, because I'm just talking about the planetary aspects. The medical aspects are different. So what I find interesting also is when it comes to the stems and branches, and I'm gonna do a separate video on this, because this is quite interesting, because when it comes to the stems and branches plus the 12 earthly branches, which everyone's familiar with in Chinese astrology, right? They have the 12 branches and the 10 heavenly stems. That adds up to the number 22, right? And there's 22 major arcana cards in the tarot. And there's also 22 letters in the Kabbalah Gematria as well, which I find fascinating. This is something I'll cover down the track, because I've done a bit of digging into this. But this is an example, for those who don't know, of a Bardsa chart. So the top line here, so the 4 pillars: year, month, day, and hour. But across the top, we've got yin fire, just as an example of the heavenly stems I was talking about before, which are connected to the 5 elements. Yin fire, yang metal, this is yin metal, and this is yang water. I think actually this is a chart of a famous guitarist in a metal band, Kirk Hammett, actually. And these are the branches, for those who don't know. So there's 22 characters that make up all these. So there's 12 animal branches and 10 heavenly stem branches, making up the number of 22. And here in the charts, we have the luck cycles we move through in life. But just to give you guys an example of this, because there's not much info on Bardsa Chinese astrology. Everyone's talking planetary astrology. So anyway, this is my little rant on the 5 elements from a planetary perspective, a planetary point of view. And for those interested, just subscribe to my channel. I'm like I said, I'm getting into some more stuff on Substack, getting some more videos. I'll do videos on YouTube and there, and we'll come up with hopefully some more wisdom for you guys to share. And like I said, stay tuned. We're getting closer to the end of the year. It's flying, so I will be doing the Year of the Horse live, and I'm just putting that out there now so people could get prepped up and prepared, and we can do some live Chinese astro chart reading. So thanks for listening, guys, and appreciate it.